Welcome to Healthy for My Purpose podcast. We are so excited. We have Dr. Towolawi here with us today. And so she's going to be a treat. She's going to be talking about her journey. She's going to be talking about what she does with children, her children's book. I think you guys are going to love it. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. Could you just start with maybe, how you grew up, how you even ended up in this position and your plant-based lifestyle?
You so much. Thank you first off, Gigi and Sersie, for having me. I'm super excited to be in community with you guys today and just to get into the conversation further. But so as far as my journey, that's a big question, but I'll take it back to growing up. So I grew up in Inglewood, California, so pretty much inner city LA, if you will, to two wonderful Nigerian immigrants who came to the US in the 70s. So pretty traditional, large household, lots of noise, lots of love, right? But around 15 years old or so, I remember reading Newsweek magazine. Both my parents, huge nerds like me, and that my mom is a chemist, my dad is an engineer, so would always be into Newsweek and magazines like that. And I remember reading an issue where the headline was, I believe it was the first one that came out, was a mad cow disease, telling about that. And I was just like, people are eating beef and they're getting sick. So my brain was just like, let's stop doing the beef, right? So that was the first thing. So eliminated beef. And actually taking it back, I never was into pork. So I pretty much wasn't really eating pork or beef. So I eliminated that. Some people thought I was kind of weird, like, some of my friends and my parents, but they didn't really care that much. It was when I eliminated chicken, when a few years after that mad cow disease, there was a whole avian flu outbreak. And I remember the Newsweek feature about that. And I was like, well, now chicken's making people sick. Let me cut that out. So I pretty much was finishing up high school, not eating beef, not eating pork, not eating chicken, occasional fish. And at that time, that was just very unusual, especially to have Nigerian parents. So pork isn't a really big thing in Nigerian culture, but certainly chicken, right? And eating beef and like for celebratory events like goat stews and things like that. So I was kind of the oddball. Then I go off to college. And at that point, maybe it's different now, but back then fish and seafood wasn't really being served in the dorm. So I was by default vegetarian. So to kind of summarize that, I fell into plant-based eating just by approaching it from a like organized standpoint of, okay, if you get sick, if you eat that, let's eliminate that. So I was kind of ahead of my time because this is like, gosh, I was 15, so, and I'm 42 now, so almost 30 years ago, right? And then get through college. After college, I worked in San Francisco, and I was pretty much vegetarian, and holding on to that lifestyle. And then after college, medical school, again, I was broke, so fish is kind of expensive, especially in Seattle. So really vegetarian, but occasionally eating seafood and salmon mainly. And then it was really only about, I'd say, 6 years ago where I went to 100% plant-based. I remember going to a conference in Portland, Oregon, and I think it's called the Northwest Nutrition Conference. That's not exactly the title, but they had some great thought leaders on plant-based nutrition and physicians. Dr. Neil Bernard, I remember, was one of the key speakers. Various oncologists, surgeons, just some great plant-based thought leaders who presented data on things like how dairy is inflammatory and how some of the issues with fish. So I was like, okay, I'm going to cut out cheese, dairy, all the things completely, and really start to adopt that lifestyle. So that's kind of the long, short answer to that question.
So when you transitioned during that time, were the people around you, like your family or friends, were they kind of intrigued? Were they kind of doing it with you, or were they kind of fighting against you? Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Because obviously people react differently when you start
Great
making those
question.
changes.
So to kind of set that up, I think since I was a little girl, I've always been the odd one, like just ahead of trends, if that makes sense, like just doing my own thing. So, just some examples like going natural. I grew up in LA, so everybody had the perm and permed out. I remember going to my room and cutting all my hair off at like 17. People thought I was crazy, and being natural is much more embraced. So just even fashion trends, I've always just kind of done my own thing. So it was just one of those things like, oh, Margaret's doing her own thing. No one ever fought me on it, honestly, or was like, it was not a big deal. Um, I remember when I met my husband, because he is more flexitarian. Luckily, I would say he's like 80% plant-based, so it's never been an issue. He's not a big meat eater, but I had asked him, well, what are we gonna do with our kids? And we had decided at that time that when we have kids now, but before we had kids, we decided we would let them decide. We'd explain to them the benefits and let them decide. We can talk more about what they decide later on in the conversation, of course. But so I've tried to surround myself with supportive people, and I try to come from a place of love and not meat shame. I just deal with my patients too, and I find you can get better buy-in that way. So yeah.
Awesome. And so, so let's kind of pivot a little bit with your patients, for example. So, I mean, we live in this food environment, and most people, I mean, at least with what we do and the people that we interact with, they are often heavily swayed by what other people are doing, you know, and letting that dictate what they do. And even presented with all the facts and the data, you know, we find that, you know, people really struggle to make that change and to stop eating certain foods that are, you know, causing the high blood pressure, the weight gain, the type 2 diabetes. And I guess, you know, when you're interacting with patients, kind of what's your approach to helping them navigate that part of the change process?
Yeah, so first kind of set it up. So I'm in private practice and I am a lifestyle medicine focused direct primary care practice in Shoreline, which is just outside of Seattle. So patients are selecting me. It's not like when I worked at a big health system before where they got assigned to me. So my patient it's kind of unique in that they're already plant curious. If not, a lot of my patients are 100% plant-based, but if they're not, they're definitely, because they know it's all over my website. It's very clear that like, this is what I do. They know about my nutrition book. So with my patients, it's not too much of a hard sell, you know, but I think for many of my patients who are 100% plant-based, they like to work with me because I'm always about, I call it the slow swap. So I'll start with one meal at a time. You know, I'm not trying to do everything all at once, right? Or it might be, for example, I try to tie it into their lab. So if I have a patient with really high LDL, I'll tell them the number one source of LDL being elevated is saturated fat. Excuse me, the saturated fat is the reason why your LDL is up. The number one source of saturated fat in the American diet, standard American diet, is dairy, specifically cheese. And they're like, oh, they can see that connection. And I'll say, let's do something. Let's give it a try where you cut back on dairy. And for a lot of people, it's the cheese that gets them. And let's see how the labs look in about 8 to 12 weeks. And then if there's no change, if you made that specific, consistent cutting back and there's no change, then hey, you know, then we'll see. It always happens that if they make the consistent change, there's a difference. I've just not seen it the other way, right? So try to get them to buy in with like having a goal, and then real objective data is always helpful too.
And probably noticing how they feel. Cheese was my last holdout. And that's when I gave that up, it was like everything opened up. I stopped getting sinus infections. Like I would get sinus infections like several times throughout the year.
Yeah.
Just, you know, just bloating. And I didn't know at the time, you know, that most of us are allergic or have an intolerance to dairy.
So
And
funny. Oh,
yeah, no, you're fine. I mean, I think we because it's so ubiquitous, it's so like everywhere you go, everything has dairy in it. Like I mean, I'm like shopping and trying to find like, you know, like, I don't know, some green tea or something like that, or I don't know, whatever, a loaf of bread is a very good example. And I look at the ingredients and it's like, dairy. I was like, why are you putting dairy in this? There's no need for this.
Absolutely. And it's so sneaky. That's why I really try to teach my patients how to read labels, right? I offer something in my practice called Shop with Your Doc, me specifically, where I will meet them at the grocery store of their choice near the clinic. And then we'll start to look and see, and we'll go over things, how dairy can be snuck in as whey or as casein, right?
Yeah.
But to your point about people have this lactose intolerant, I think 80% of the world has this deficiency in the lactase enzyme, right? So we're not even, most of us aren't even supposed to even be processing it, but here we are due to big dairy and marketing, you know, still being told that we must consume this to get the gains, right? So
Yeah, that you're exactly right. It's the money, it's the, you know, who has the most influence in terms of infiltrating it into the food system. And then all the different, you know, government subsidies that go to fund it to make it cheaper. I mean, you go to a coffee shop and you want something with oat milk in it, for example, and you have to pay an extra $1 for it, which is ridiculous.
yeah.
But it's because, you know, the food system has subsidized dairy to make it less expensive. So they try to justify upcharging plant-based milks I'll go off on a tangent. I don't want to go there. Although I did hear Starbucks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that. That's some good news. That's some good news. So
yeah, that is some good news. So those listening or watching, as we're recording this, Starbucks recently announced that they are eliminating the upcharge for plant-based milks in their drinks, which is long overdue. I actually, I wrote a letter to them back in, this was before Sersie, before we met Sersie. This was like in I think it was 2018. I wrote a letter to their executive person and whoever was in charge of sustainability at the time, because they weren't accounting for cow milk in their environmental footprint calculations. And so I went off on a tangent. I published a blog article. I wrote them a letter and a couple letters. And it's good to see they finally done something about it. I even sent something to PETA trying to work that angle. So anyway, awesome. So going back to your patients, so your patients are people, and I think that's great. You know, you branded yourself in a way where you're attracting the people who want that kind of support in terms of transitioning to more of a plant predominant lifestyle, or fully plant-based. What do you find to be some of the biggest, I would say, successes that you've seen in your practice with people that you've worked with who've kind of transitioned to this lifestyle?
oh gosh, I'm thinking about one lady in particular who, she joined the practice and I was kind of sharing my story and kind of giving her swap ideas. So she ended up deep diving and I think getting a subscription with forks over knives and all the things. And next time I saw her, she was like, I've ditched dairy. I have, I'm trying to do no oil and all the things. In her labs, we got her labs. And then comparing them to her last doctors, there's a great improvement in her cholesterol, even in her blood sugar. So that one just comes to mind because it was just a beautiful story because this particular person thought it'd be very hard for her. A lot of people will say it's so hard to give up cheese, which we know that's by design too. The way I think I read something, it fires off receptors similar to what the opioid receptors fire off in the brain, so it's addicting by nature. But that particular patient, I was really proud of her, and now she's, golly, I remember she had started off doing 5K. She did her first 5K earlier in the year. And now when I saw her for a physical last month, she's ready to do her third one. So she's feeling better overall, and now she's able to move more. And that was just a great story. So.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about, because, I think with the traditional doctors, you kind of go into the office, you maybe have 5-10 minutes at the most to really get into your issues. And sometimes that may not even be enough to counsel and coach someone. What does your engagement look like? Because I know you talk about meeting the doctor at the grocery store. What does your engagement look like that's different from the typical 10-minute sit down, kind of situation?
Absolutely. So when I worked for a large corporation for almost 8 years, conveyor belt every 15 minutes, right? In my practice, appointments are 60 minutes, on average, or they can be 30 minutes if somebody's like they're pretty stable or they don't have any big thing they want to talk about. But in that 60 minutes, a lot of things are going on. So traditional primary care, but also I'm always kind of checking back in around the pillars related to lifestyle medicine. So I'm tapping in about their nutrition, how they're doing with that, their movement, their sleep, their stress, especially in this current day and age. Stress is a big thing we're tackling through with patients. And then healthy social connections, as well as reducing their risky substances. So I have the time to do those things. And where I worked before, I just didn't have the time. It was much easier for you to walk in, for me to see your labs showed pre-diabetes and elevated LDL and be like, you're going to have to be on a statin, Mr. So-and-so soon. So lose some weight. Oh, you want to get on metformin, Miss So-and-so? Okay, I'll see you next year. That's how that's how it was before. I didn't have the time, right? And that is why I had to um leave traditional medicine. And when I learned about direct primary care, I was so excited because I felt like I had found my people. It's a way for to keep me excited about being a traditional primary care doctor in that way, because a lot of my cohorts are leaving medicine. It's just the truth. I've been doing this almost 15 years as far as being a clinician, and folks, when I talk to some of the younger doctors that I've met, they're like, I'm trying to be done. I'm trying to be non-clinical in about 3 years out from residency, which just breaks my heart. I think because the current system just makes it hard to really do medicine. I'll just be honest with you. I know you didn't ask that specific thing, but yeah. So I have the time, frankly, Sersie, to answer your question, to do a deeper dive and get some of the root causes and meet people where they're at. And if I see they're struggling with, cooking ideas, then as part of my practice, I offer meal planning. I work with a dietitian to have access to a software where we can tweak and adjust and set the parameters to, beginner if they're not a big cook, and kind of optimize some specific goals through that meal planning app. So I try to give people options in short and give them time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm sure you've run into this, like when you're working with a patient and they move down this path, and yes, they lower their A1C or their cholesterol, but they also have these other, I would say, little quality of life improvements that happen as a result of making this change. Have you, like, I'll give you one example. We've had, because we do more coaching, in terms of helping people transition to this lifestyle, and things like, oh, I used to have this rash on my hand and it just went away.
Yeah.
Not expecting that, that it's like they do this because they were trying to lower their A1C or whatever. Or, oh, I have so much more mental clarity, like I feel like I could see things and I could taste food better and I could just think more clearly. Like, have you run into that? And what are some other things?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
the skin is a big one because I don't think I shared with you guys. Aside from my primary care practice, Nurture Wilson, I actually have a separate holistic skincare practice called SkinatMD, where I have my own skincare line, and I see people for scalp issues and fungal issues and acne and eczema. So when I tell people as part of their treatment plan, it always talks about ditching dairy, and then when people actually do it, the eczema is better. The seborrheic dermatitis, which is a fungal infection, yeast infection of the scalp, is better, right? And then for my primary care patients, their asthma is better, right? Or they're having more energy, they're finding, because they're eating more fiber and more whole foods and less processed foods. So yeah.
Yeah, they're getting nutrients maybe that their body they weren't getting before, as a result of that dietary change. Yeah. Cersei, were you going to ask something?
No, I was just gonna say we will have to get into that skincare situation later, but we just bumped into that by accident there.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but let's talk about like family dynamics, like like you talked about coming from a Nigerian background and Nigerian
Mm-hmm.
family. Um, for people who are coming from different ethnic backgrounds that maybe this lifestyle is different, what do you suggest in terms of modifying it where you don't feel like you're losing the culture, but you are kind of tweaking it in a way that's still relevant to you? What advice would you give for that? Like, how have you come back to the Nigerian community as a plant-based person and still integrate those foods? And how do you teach your patients to do the same?
Great question. I'll be honest, it's so much easier than it was when I was 15, 16, 17. There's just so many more options. And even when I tell people, like, honestly, when we go back to, our roots to the continent, meat is not even the main thing like it is in the US. It's like a little side thing, right? So I mentioned my husband is not 100% plant-based. He's like 70, 80%. So I do not cook meat. So we do a lot, and he cooks too, right? But he doesn't cook meat in the house. But if we go out to eat, he'll probably get some meat if he wants to, right? But so we do a lot of beans, a lot of stews. It's very easy to not eat meat in Nigerian culture. I should say that. I think at the time, though, when I was growing up, it was just this was a foreign thing. There are a lot more influencers of different cultures who are vegan. So there's this, I think her first name is, I don't want to get her name wrong, but I know her handle is Vegan Nigerian, and I have her cookbook. So there's this whole movement. She has, last time I checked, bazillion, not bazillion, a lot of followers. So it's not as abnormal as people would think. And I always try to tell people, especially my Black patients, from when I last was told, Black Americans are the highest rate of turning to veganism, and there's so many great resources. The Afro Vegan Society, for example, is one that comes up, and I'm on their newsletter. They just released their annual, Thanksgiving holiday recipe planner, just so people have options for when they're going to, cook for people and go to people's homes. And then I pass it in my clinic. I don't have one near me, but people can look this up. The Afro, I think it is that through the Afro Vegan Society, or it's either through Tracy McIntyre's organization. It's called the African American Vegan Starter Guide, and this is 30-page. Have y'all seen that? Have you guys seen that? Yeah. So I about 3 years ago, I reached out to the organization. They sent me 500 of those things, and I passed them out to patients. I have so many. I'm still passing them out to this day. So I really try to let people know, like, this is not true, that it is not something that we are adopting. We Black folk are adopting this way of eating, and here are some resources. When we go back to the continent, this is not really foreign to us. Meat is really on the side there. And then even for my Latinx patients, in my office, I have various cultural cookbooks. I grew up in LA, so I love Mexican food. So I have a vegan Mexican cookbook. I used to love, when I ate fish, sushi. That was one thing that was hard for me to give up. So I have some vegan sushi cookbooks, Caribbean, a whole smorgasbord. So there's a lot of options, and I try to really show these cookbooks as examples to people. And then when I do various wellness talks in the Seattle area, and I have this food as medicine series that I've done. And then it's a 3-part series and broken over 3 different Saturdays. And during one of the sessions, I have a whole corner where I lay out various books authored by uh, chefs of color. And then I toss in my book as well. But yeah, so just leading by example personally, and then also giving people resources that look like them. So yeah.
Awesome. Now, and I love early on when you were talking about the lifestyle medicine pillars in terms of, the food, the sleep, the stress, the movement and all of that. What of the different lifestyle medicine pillars, which one, I mean, we tend to gravitate towards food a lot because that seems to be like one of the biggest ones that people struggle with. But what are some other lifestyle medicine areas that you think are really a challenge in this day and time?
Honestly, the stress is a huge one. And then I would say the social connection, those two come to mind. The stress. So many patients I see, so many people, not just my patients, are stressed. We just had this election, right? But even before the election, people have work stress, people have home stress, a lot of my patients are midlife women like myself, we're perimenopausal, we're trying to navigate that and raising, my kids are young because I had them a little later, but some of my friends, they have teens, and then that kind of navigating that, right? And then social connection. A lot of people are still dealing with this post-pandemic isolation and haven't really come out of that shell, and they're struggling with that. And we do know from our lifestyle medicine training that folks who are socially isolated tend to have worse health outcomes. So it breaks my heart when I see patients who I know are really struggling. And that's why I'm so happy that I do have these longer appointments, because I realize, I might be the only person they may engage with for this amount of time, because they just tend to be more introverted. Or I'm thinking about 2 particular patients of mine who the pandemic just really did a number on them, and they're just very cautious to still be in large crowds and things like that. So yeah.
I hear that. Were you at the last conference, lifestyle medicine?
No, I was at my 20-year Stanford Reunion, college reunion, so I did not make that.
Oh,
But
okay.
I'm hoping to go. I think next year it's in Dallas area, and
Yep.
Dallas is one of my favorite cities to frequent and have fun in. So I'm gonna try to go to that one if I can make it work.
Yeah, awesome. Dr. Kim Williams, right?
Yes.
So he gave a presentation that, he goes through the presentation about, why all the different reasons to adopt a whole food plant-based lifestyle. Well, one of the ones that kind of blew my mind was some data he shared around fish, and more specifically around the microplastics and nanoplastics that are ending up in people's arteries, and it kind of embedding with the plaque and creating catastrophic, events as a result. It's really, I mean, I guess some studies have come out even just this year on that topic, and I'm kind of eager to. I actually grabbed one of the studies he shared, and I'm going to go through it and read it this week. I started reading it, but I got to finish reading it.
Wow, that's great. I may have to email you or text you to get that, because I have not seen that data. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'll email it to you, but it's pretty scary. But so fish used to be like considered quote unquote healthy, like, back in the day because of the omega-3s and all of that. And now because of the environmental pollution, it's becoming one of the more unhealthy foods to eat because of the plastics, the micro and nanoplastics that they're finding. I mean, they've done some pretty in-depth studies. This one is a New England Journal of Medicine article. I'll send it over to you, but it's kind of like, wow, I mean, we all know that there's some other, things with fish that may not be healthful, but now that you add into it the plastics, it's crazy. So anyway, again, I go off on tangents sometimes. Cersei's like, stay on track.
No, it's okay. It's fine. So let's get into your children's book and how how this idea came to you. Awesome. Oh, it looks beautiful. And we'll put the link to that in the show notes. But get us to how you developed the book, what the book is about, how you've been reaching the community with this book, and what are your hopes for this book?
Thank you. So this book is my love letter, I like to say, to my patient community, the plant-based community, to my children who are the main characters and narrators of the book. And the book is called Ayomide and Shay's Kitchen, A Kid's Guide to Plant-Based Nutrition from A to Z. And you asked a few questions, so hopefully I don't go off topic too much. I try to stay on stay and answer questions correctly. But I was realizing that I was seeing so many adult patients who, frankly, honestly, you guys didn't even just don't know how to eat healthy. I'm just gonna give it to you straight, right? Like, and when I push them more, maybe either they just didn't learn when they were kids, honestly, or they have these jobs and they're just too busy, yada yada, And then I was starting to see, as a family doctor, I see children, and I was starting to see how things would trickle down to the kids. And like, honestly, working with teens, I'm on the board for a nonprofit for young girls based out in the Seattle area called Project Girl Mentoring. A lot of the teens, when I would do talks around nutrition, just over their heads, like aren't cooking. So I was like, okay, I got to find a way to reach these kids when they're young, when their taste buds are still getting trained. A lot of people don't know this, but the very first thing I ever wanted to be when I was a little girl was a writer. And my very first book, when I was probably 6 or 7 years old, I remember doodling. I did not save it. I wish I saved it. It was the apple family. It was a family of apples that lived in a tree, so it's just so funny that here, full circle. And I remember, telling my mother, Mommy, I want to be a writer. And she was just like, she's immigrant. She was like, she said to me, I love my mother, by the way. She listens to this. Love her. She knows I love her. Love you, Mom. She was like, there's no money in that. And then walked off. I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew that was not a good thing. So I kind of like parked that and I went on to do all these other things, right? But I've always enjoyed writing, poetry, short stories. I've just always done that. So for me, just, being being a clinician and having an interest in nutrition. So when I was in residency, family medicine residency at the University of Washington, we had to pick areas of concentration. So my classmates, we were cohorts of 8. Some people were doing women's health, international health, sports medicine. I was very unique in that I chose nutrition. So I've always been interested in nutrition. So I'm trying to get to the point of nutrition, wanting to, once I realized that patients know how to eat healthy, and then wanting to target the kids. That's pretty much how the book came together. And then at that point, so writing it, I wanted it to rhyme, and I knew the target audience. I wanted to be preschool to early elementary, so pretty much 2 to 8, right? And then I knew it, like when I think about the kids' books that my kids who are 6 and 8 enjoyed, especially when they're younger, they were always like rhyming and really visually appealing. So I had to rhyme. So I just got to start. I got to writing and rhyming, and I would, get the feedback of my husband and my children. My kids were target audience there. And then after that, it was finding an illustrator. So my illustrator, Annabella Ortiz, is based in North Carolina. Found her. I'm in this Facebook group called African American Authors and Illustrators, and I found her in that group. She's Latin X, but another author in the group had used her and has showed their book cover. We'd always would share what people were up to, and I was like, oh my gosh, love the book cover and illustrations. Who's the illustrator? And then I got her info. So that's how the book came together. And as far as the process from start to finish was probably about a year and some change. And then I've self-published it, which that was something I had to learn how to do. But luckily I had self-published a book the year before about loss. I have 2 children, but I've birthed 3 children, and one of them passed away. So my first book was a children's book, navigating how, if you've lost a child, how do you, share that with the children who've come after. So that's my first book, called Ayumide's Train Ride to Graceland. So I've gotten my feet wet with that. So I knew how to go about self-publishing a book, and I've been marketing it ever since then. It was released July 2022. And I've been really proud of what I've been able to do, and I'll share what I've been able to do with this book. So I always knew that I wanted to be able to get the book into as many kids' hands as possible, and if they could get it for free, right? So it's in the Seattle Public Library, the Snowball Public Library, King County Public Library. I've been able to get booked, where by the Seattle Public Library, where I go in and I give talks to kids, and so I get paid to do that, which is really nice because all of this costs a lot of money. And I read the book, and then I have created some curriculum around the book that I go in and do teachings with. I call it plant-based nutrition with a physician, eat the rainbow. And then I have different age-related things where I do like things, for example, bingo related to the book. And then I have, if it's a younger group, some cut out and match the shapes and things like that. Just kind of depending on who the audience is, I tailor what I'm doing, word search, things like that. And then I've been able to speak about my work at the Planet Expo, which is Canada's largest plant-based expo. They had their first US expo just this past year in Seattle, and I was able to be one of the keynote speakers. Dr. Greger was there and other people. But yeah, so I've been able to give talks to various school districts: Seattle Public School District, Bothell Public School District, Edmonds Public School District. Yeah, so it's been really great. I've been able to be on one for sure, television shows. There's a public television show for kids called Look, Listen, and Learn TV in Seattle, and the founder of the company met me at a book festival, bought the book, loved the book, reached out to me. They created a whole episode around healthy eating and plant-based eating, and I got to read the book with my son. Ooh, I'm getting a little choked up thinking about it. With my son, Ayomide, it was just a beautiful thing to have him be reading it and I'm reading. And then I led a little cooking lesson where I feature a recipe that I came up with, a date bites recipe, where I was able to do that on camera, but it was pretty cool. And then I found out earlier this year that episode won an award, took home silver place in this award that I was not aware of till I learned about it, that the show had won it. It's called the Telly Awards. So anyway, I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but the book has been awesome, and I've been able to do a lot with it and expose a lot of people to it. Oh, the other show is Newsday Northwest, which is a King 5 morning show. I was able to talk about the book too. So yeah. It's been
Wow,
great.
that's awesome. So award
Sorry,
winning.
that was a lot of rambling there, but
No, this is exciting. No, I
Yeah.
think anytime you could plant those seeds with kids is so good because, even though, we have this environment that we live in, it just helps them to see there are other options at an early age. I think, when you expose them, they get curious and then, are more apt to want to try and taste and, cook with or whatever. The foods that you're sharing with them, and also the benefits of them, because that's what the book is kind of helping kids to understand some of those benefits.
Exactly. And I didn't even say that, but you set me up well. And that's what this is. It is a bite-sized nutrition book for kids. And I've had so many adults say, I didn't even know some of these things. And like, I'll be honest with you guys, it's marketed to kids, but it's really for families. It's really for the adults. This is not a basic book. I'm talking about calcium. I'm talking about vitamin D. I'm talking about fiber and glucose. So that's this,
Yeah.
it's really getting down to the nitty gritty, right? And in the back, I have something where I add in to have the kids take the book to the grocery store. And I talk about, did you enjoy the book? Take it with you next time you go to the grocery store with your family and see how many foods from the book you can identify. Try something new. Let us know what you love, right? And then when I go into schools, I forgot to say this, I usually will work with the coordinator, and so far they've always handled it. I think in the future I may put that into my budget when the people contract with me, but where they actually provide taste tests from different foods, some in the book, some outside from the book, for kids to try. And so we've had people try dates for the first time, squash for the first time. I'm thinking of one of the coordinators, she had just on her own, she got pistachio milk for the kids to try, so it's really fun.
Yeah, it's so funny because Sersie and I were in Cleveland, Ohio in July working with a group of kids at different ages. I think they ranged from maybe 7 to 18 or 16 or something like that. It was a wide range. And we were making food like together with them and letting them taste it, food that they would normally not be eating. And it was so hilarious to see some of their reactions. Some of it was like, oh, this is horrible, I hate it.
Yeah.
Actually, this is pretty good. I wouldn't have thought that I would like it, but it actually is good. I think I'd like some more.
That is my favorite right there. When like I'm surprised, like oh, it actually comes together well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, would you mind, this is kind of impromptu, doing just a little short book reading? Like maybe take 2 pages out of your book and just read, because for people listening to this on, or even watching this on YouTube or listening to it on whatever channel, it'd be good to like let them get a glimpse into it. So I'm sure when
Yeah.
they hear it, they'll be inclined to think of some young person in their life that could benefit from this.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm inclined to kind of like pick random pages, right? Then I'm like, to give you guys the breadth of it. So if that's okay, maybe I'll just go ahead and read maybe 3 pages. I do want to set up the intro, if that's okay, which is the opening page here. Hello, my name is Ayomide. This is Sheyi, my little sister. Together, we will teach you some things about plant-based nutrition. We are excited to welcome you to our kitchen. So step right up. There are so many tasty foods that fill this space. We can't wait to give you an alphabet tour of the place. A is for apple. Kids and parents love them, of course. Whether sweet or sour, they are a yummy fiber source.
Mm.
Let me jump to another page. Let's see here. All right, so I'm gonna jump to energy. E is for energy. We need energy to learn and run at school. Plant-based proteins, fats, and carbohydrates provide great fuel.
Ooh, it does rhyme.
Yes, yeah. I spent a lot of time on that, making sure. And then I'm gonna do 2 more different ones. So I have to have a cultural nod. We talked about me being Nigerian. J is for jollof. It's our favorite type of rice. Stew it with tomatoes or just the right amount of spice. And then
Mm.
this last one I'll do because when I go to schools, it always makes the kids laugh. L is for legumes. Have you heard of chickpeas? How about lentils? Both are found in this group. Legumes keep you regular. Yes, they help you poop. And then the kids, they laugh. It's
That
great.
was
Love
good.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, everything rhymes.
Yeah.
Everything rhymes. It was really important for me for kids to see themselves. So yes, my kids who are Black are the narrators, right? But then I have other nods to. I talk about ube, right, and I talked about jollof obviously already, and then I have habanero,
Mhm.
right, and then when it came down to X, I was struggling with what to make rhyme for that. When doing my research, I learned about shigwa, which is a Mandarin word, but it is a variety of watermelon grown in South Africa. So I talk about that.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
really try to be intentional about representation because
Awesome.
so many little kids, they don't see themselves in books like this. And as
Yeah.
a mom, as a doctor, as a proud Black woman, that was a non-negotiable for me. So that
Yeah.
is why the book looks like this.
Awesome.
So yeah, and
So
it's
don't.
also available. I'm sorry, just real quick in Spanish, maybe it'll be in other languages
Oh,
in the future.
wow.
The Spanish and English text coincide along each other there. So if
That's
someone
awesome.
tells me, "Oh, I don't speak Spanish," I say that's okay because you can learn because the English and Spanish are right next to each other. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's amazing. So
thank
can you get
you.
into, since you brought up your wonderful children, how
Yes.
was the transition for your family? What did that look like? I know you mentioned that you were going to give them the choice. Get into how your family evolved and what that looks like now.
Yeah, great question. So my son is 8, my daughter is 6. My son is 100%. So he uses the word vegan. He's very strict about. He makes sure no leather. No, he knows all about that, right? I never pushed that on him, honestly. He did not come out the womb eating vegan. I wish he was here right now because with perimenopause, I get this brain fog. I cannot tell you when it clicked for him, But I would say in the past 2 years, that's when he became strict and like he's checking labels. Are you wearing leather? So that was his choice. My daughter is like my husband, where I say more 70, 80%. I'm laughing because I remember I'll just give it to you straight. So I don't eat meat. But if my daughter will have her way, she's gonna eat anything that she sees that she wants to eat. She's my strong-willed child, right? So I don't prepare those things for her, but if we're out at a party, and this is why also why I tell my parents, I like to be very honest, like, I have a strong-willed child, and I used to do the thing where I would pack the vegan treats for her when we go to a birthday party, and my son would eat them happily. She would fall out, make a scene. It was this whole thing, and I decided it's not worth me stressing out and me being like, I get anxiety. I just can't. So I might let her have the dairy cake at that event, right? But when she's not eating like that at home or elsewhere, if I can help it, right? But in that moment, I have to choose my sanity and her. So just wanted to share that so people don't beat themselves up. Because when I first released the book, some people would be like, "Oh, we're not vegans. It's not for us." I said, "This book is for everybody, literally." So I'm trying to make sure this lifestyle is more inclusive and people feel welcome. So I try to be mindful of the language. And I found that for me, if I say veganism, people are like they're more likely to shun it, right? So that's why I like to say plant-based, and I'll clarify and say I'm 100%, so people aren't giving me things I don't want to eat, right? So, but yeah, so my kids, we let them choose. My son has chosen to be very ethical about the whole approach and says he's vegan and proud of that, and lets everybody know. My daughter, if she has her way, will eat whatever she wants, but at home she's eating what we make her, which is great plant food. So
Do you have any plans, any future plans as far as speaking at other events or yeah?
yeah. So part of my business arm is giving wellness talks and then doing curriculum around the book. So I was just asked earlier this week to do something with the Seattle Public School District again and get something on the books. So we're still working on the official dates for next month, but those are some upcoming things that we're going to get back in the fold with. And then next summer, because I usually tend to try to book as far as I can with my speaking engagements, I will probably get hired again by the Seattle Public Library as part of their summer education series that they do. So yeah.
Cool. Do you publish those on your website, or is it
Yeah,
through the
I'll,
library's
I'll
website?
be, oh, as far as the events, so the library does that on their website. The Seattle Public School District, the schools do that. I think marketing within the school, they let their families know. But if it's a public library, then that's all over their website, and then I just share on my channels. Yeah.
Awesome. So, can you just, you're very passionate about this lifestyle. What would you like just to tell the audience about just approaching it, trying it, not being intimidated? I know you talked about the word vegan, but what are
Yeah.
some tips that you would just say, for someone who might be intimidated by it or is kind of hesitant to really do a try, and maybe they don't have a plant-based doctor and want to get one, just kind of walk them through how they would kind of navigate that.
It's good. So I would first say take a breath, and start slow. It can be really overwhelming, especially if you're going from the extreme. Like what does that look like? Extreme is somebody who's eating a lot of processed food, loves their red meat, loves, their fried everything, right? Is more kind of just a meat lover, if you will. I think it can be hard. People have done it, don't get me wrong, but I think it can be hard to go cold turkey. So I think people start slow, start with one meal at a time. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, pick a meal. And let's say you are a everyday eggs and bacon type of person. So focus on breakfast, and maybe you switch from eggs and bacon every day to, you know, making this up on the fly, eggs and whole wheat toast, for a season, right? And then you phase out the eggs over time, right? So one meal at a time. And then once you've got breakfast down, then you maybe target lunch and then kind of go from there, right? And then start with the foods so that was the meals, and then start with the foods that you like and see how you can make them more plant-based, more whole foods. So if you are a fan of Taco Tuesday and before you're doing a lot of ground beef, beans, let's get that fiber intake up, right? So you can try different beans, see what's your vibe, but maybe you're a black bean person, maybe you're a pinto bean, right? So kind of exploring that. And then try to keep it fun. The social media has so much great, plant-based influencers. Stop following those accounts. Do searches for plant-based eating, whole food, plant-based eating. So you can, that way you're not doing too much of the vegan processed foods, because I tell people, hey, look, those are not bad, but if you're eating that all the time, you're not going to be healthy, right? Like, and there's a huge movement around vegan. I call it vegan junk food. There's so many restaurants popping up everywhere, right? So just trying to be mindful of your intake with that as well. Because I think a lot of times people are adopting this lifestyle. They think, oh, that's all safe to eat, but it's not the healthiest food either. So yeah, so going slow, starting off with one meal at a time, and that's a good place, I'd say, to go.
Awesome. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. You mentioned earlier that you're in the skin business. Can you just talk about how just eating plant-based is, obviously healthy for the skin, but talk about how you got into actually making products and what that all about?
So, my whole thing is I like to look good and feel good. So this is important to me, but nothing beats what's inside. So that was already, like, as a primary care doctor, I care about people's, literally, their insides. Do you have high cholesterol? Is your blood sugar good? Your mental health good, right? But you want the outside to match too. I'm not, like, I like to look good. I'm not going to sugarcoat. I am from LA. I tell people, I like to look good. And my parents are Nigerian, and they're Igbo specifically, which is an ethnic group. We're a very proud people. I think some of that has carried into my adulthood and how I present myself, right? So I found that as a doctor, people would ask me about skin products. And for years, I would say, go use this brand, go use this brand. And then one day it dawned on me, should probably have my own brand, because people trust me as a physician. And that way it can be one-stop shopping. Literally, I'm sitting in my office now. To my right is my storefront where I have all my products. So that's how I got the initial idea. And then I started to work with companies, formulators, and kind of went off from there. And I also wanted products that were holistic and that I would feel proud about and good about putting on my kids, right? There's a lot of things that are not good for your skin. And especially since I see people with eczema, fragrances in so many products that is so unnecessary, right? So being mindful about that, and I'm having a lot of soothing ingredients, aloe, oatmeal, hyaluronic acid, which is not an acid, but a sugar molecule that brings moisture to the skin. So just having a little more say in that, and then being able to provide that to my patients was so important to me. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
Are people able to buy it online or just at
Oh,
your?
yeah. Yeah. So SkinatMD.com, which I don't know if I shared that. I think I just focus on the kids book when I send you guys the contact information. So I may have to send you guys that. But yeah, I have a whole separate website. And we ship anywhere in the United States.
Okay.
So
Yeah, we
yeah.
definitely will include the link to that in the show notes. We'd love to, because people are always looking. I am just thinking of one of my friends in particular lives in Mississippi. She's always looking for good skincare products doesn't have like all these, parabens and all this other stuff.
All the extra stuff, right? So yeah, now I have a full product line. So I have eczema. My first product is my oat butter that I came out with, and that's my baby. I did a lot of research of the dermatology journals, and when you look at the data, oatmeal has great anti-inflammatory and antifungal properties. So that product is, colloidal oatmeal, shea butter, arrowroot powder, grapeseed oil, and mango butter. That's probably my best-selling product this time of year, especially. Then I have my own sunscreen line.
Mhm.
I don't like the word anti-aging, because we all want to age, we just want to look good doing it. So I have my pro-aging products, So yeah, moisturizers, cleansers, the whole gamut essentially. I made it. So y'all just have to just look here for everything you need when it comes to skin. So yeah, lip balm, all the things. So yeah.
We might
Awesome.
have to do a little online shopping, Sersie.
Awesome. So the heartbeat of what Gigi and I do is we talk about being healthy for your divine purpose. Can you just speak to, I know you do things holistically, how a patient or even just people that you work with can leverage using their faith or their spirituality to actually motivate them and undergird them to be healthy?
Yeah, and I will say, when I forgot which one of you initially reached out to me, but that I think it was you, Gigi. Forgive me if Cersei, if that was
Yeah.
not the case. When I did the quick, I'm always getting requests all the time, and I don't always answer requests. I actually have staff that can field the ones, and I think if it's right, Gigi, help me out. I was so excited. I think I texted you.
You
So
did.
when I went to your website, I was like, this is amazing, right? Like, this is like, because to
Yeah.
me, faith is very. I am a woman. of faith, like, ooh, God has done so much for me. I could, ooh, you don't even know. You don't even know. I've already been through a lot that people don't realize. I think, tangent real quick. I think people see me highly accomplished, doctor, all the things, right? But people don't know my testimony. People don't know what I've been through. I share that I've lost a child. That already can tell you a lot about somebody, right? So I forgot what you asked me already. I'm sorry. But, what's the question, Sersie? I got a little
No, but
emotional there.
keep going though. You're talking about your
Okay.
faith, how important it
Oh,
is to
yeah.
you, but
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
how somebody could use that to overcome
Got
the
it.
obstacles with
Yeah.
their, yeah,
I think I was sharing how that's why I was drawn to wanting to talk with you guys, because to me, caring for your body and being a believer go hand in hand, because God wants, oh, sorry, emotional here. You may have to edit this out, but God wants us to be good to our body. It's temporary, but while we're here on earth, He really wants us to be good to our body. So eating well and having good, healthy thoughts, right, and having a positive life outlook is the highest honor to God, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think I got a little choked up thinking about my daughter. She would have been 11 later on this month. So this time of year is always a little bit hard. You can keep this in
yeah,
if you want. But anyway,
yeah. I'm
yeah.
there with you too. I lost a son as well in 2010, so he would have been
Oh
14
yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So totally understand the the grief that you manage but never eliminate per se.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry. She would have been golly, I had my son a little over a year later. So give me a second. My son's gonna be 9. So she's gonna be 10 this month. Sorry, I said 11. Anyway,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So this November is always kind of, a little tricky than talking about it. You never know when grief hits you,
Yeah.
as you know. It could be during when you're filming a podcast with 2 lovely people. But
So let's just dig into
yeah,
this a little bit and get into how people can contact you. Do you
yeah,
find that um, this journey of this health has kind of opened up your divine purpose in a way? Can you just talk about how God has led you in so many different ways based on just the things you've been through, your health, your pivoting, and
yeah.
all that?
Yeah, so I feel like God is always there with me every step of the way, because there's just so many things that have happened, even being a business owner, and being trying to be a good wife and a good mom and a good friend and a good daughter and a good sister, all the things. If I didn't have my spirituality, my faith to tap in to keep me just in line, and remain hopeful in spite of everything going around me when things seem crazy, because being a business owner, things fluctuate, right? And if I didn't have that faith, I think it would be hard to press on, right? And I do think there's a huge connection between mood and food, right? So I know when I'm not eating the healthiest, because I always tell people I'm not perfect by any means. I was emotionally eating earlier this week after the election results, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, God, I need to reel it in, because I'm starting to feel not so good, right? So, you know, I think it'd be very hard to do what I do and not have faith, and I also need to have a lot of discernment as a business owner when people are coming at me and have different requests. And even in my current practice, a lot of people will want to join my practice, especially, so I was listed as a Seattle Top Doctor 2024. Just came out in the fall. So a lot of people were wanting to call the office and see if they could join. And I tell people, I'm not for everybody. So I have to be really selective about the type of patients I bring in. So just having that spiritual discernment is really huge to me as well. So that's all I'll say on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that you said the food and the mood. Can you
Mhm.
just talk about how your mood can be affected by what you eat? Because I think a lot of times people don't associate the mental health with the food that we're eating. Like physical ailments, I think they get the connection, but the mood that we feel on a daily basis, how does the food actually affect that?
Yeah, so there have been studies that have shown how links to, heightened anxiety with more processed foods, refined sugars, and then even depression. People have had improvements in depression when they're opting to eat more anti-inflammatory foods. When I tell people eating the rainbow is great, because you don't have to think about it. If you eat these foods, you're going to get these anti-inflammatory benefits. So those are some of the examples that I like to think about and use with patients, when it comes to this time of year, especially when it's the weather out here starting to get a little grayer and rainier in Seattle, and people will want to reach for those comfort foods, which aren't always the healthiest options. There's kind of this if you do this, this might happen. So this, you might feel a little more down. You might feel a little more anxious. This could be why, I'm trying to make that link for them. So, and using myself as an example too, like I think patients love how, I have a lot of patients who are women. And right now, perimenopause is in the menopause care. Perimenopause is really popular in the news and all the things. And, when I talk with some of my patients, I'll tell them my own personal stories, but I think helps them realize, okay, the doctor's going through this too, or, it's getting grayer. I'm from California. I do get a little seasonal affective disorder. It wasn't the case for when I lived here the past 16 years, but the past 2 winters has been hard for me. And I think that has to do with some of the perimenopause transition that I'm going through. So just being really candid about that and using myself as an example, I found people tend to say, okay, this lady seems authentic around this. I should listen to her. So yeah.
And menopause, perimenopause is something that I think historically wasn't really talked about much. I'm so glad to hear that you're talking about it and more people are talking about it, because I think even like when I went through it, I'm in my early 50s, and when I went through it kind of young, I went through menopause at like 46, I think, or somewhere around there. And it wasn't really talked about much. It wasn't like, even my mom, she would just say, oh yeah, you're going to be going through menopause, your periods are going to stop, and then that was it. She didn't like tell me like what all was going to happen as a result of that.
Right.
So I'm always making a point to let people know whenever I have a conversation about it, and that they're around that age, to let them know, about, menopause and perimenopause, because I do think there's a tendency to just kind of, and it goes back to, I think, the social connections and all of that, where you tend to just kind of isolate yourself or just not talk about that. And you go through it like by yourself, so to speak. And it just, it's just so much harder. And there's, obviously more information today than there was even just, 5-10 years ago around it. So again, another topic I can go off on a tangent with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So can you tell where can people find you on social media, website, skincare? Give us all of that, where people can find you if they wanted to reach out to you for any of your services, or even have you speak somewhere.
Thank you. So the main general website that leads to all the other things is going to be Margaret Towolawi MD.com. So my first name, Margaret, then my last name right after that, TOWOLAWIM for medical, DrMD.com. And then that website will lead you to the primary care practice, Nurture Well Center, the skin business that has the skincare products for sale online as well, SkinatMD, and then some links to the office email to get in contact with me if you want to book me for a virtual seminar, workshop, in person, anything like that. That's on there too as well. And then links to the children's book, where yes, my book is in Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the things, but if you buy directly from my website, I will sign it. There's an option on where you can order to type in whoever you want me to sign it out to, and I'll personalize it for you, and then throw in a little bookmark that has a recipe card for the Eat the Rainbow smoothie. Ioma and Shay's Eat the Rainbow smoothie. And then I also have, I didn't talk about this, but I have my own, I'm really into wellness mushrooms, reishi, lion's mane. I have links to my vegan mushroom supplement line. So lots of fun things on margarettowalimd.com. And then on the Instagram, my author page is author Margaret Towolawi on Instagram. And then the SkinStat, the skin business is SkinatMD on Instagram. And then my primary care is Nurture Well Center. So yeah, those are the main ones.
We'll be sure to link all of that in the show notes to this. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for having a wonderful conversation with us.
Yes.
Thank you for having me, you guys. And I look forward to connecting with you guys in the future.
Awesome.